Thinking about self-publishing and don't know where to start? Join the Spa Girls each week for a fun-filled podcast full of honest advice, tips, and resources. I'm Trudy J, and I'm here. Some other people.
And you are here, and
Yes.
I'm here too. It's Shah Barrett here.
I'm also here, and it's Cheryl Phipps.
And strangely enough, I'm also here, and I'm Wendy Bella.
It's the full contingent.
And we are the Spa Girls.
So that was a good intro.
It's going to be one of those days, clearly.
Oh my gosh, it is too. I was like, had to look down at my notes to remember the new intro, and then I forgot that I wasn't doing the
neural pathways.
It's amazing how you just go back to the thing that you remember. So, you know.
Well, you have been doing it for like years and years.
Years and years and years.
Yeah.
So, anyway, talking about doing things for years and years and years, today we are talking about setting yourself up for success with your first draft, how to set it up and then write your first draft on a book. We're probably leaning more to talking about your very first book, first draft, but there'll be other, it's just the ways that we use to set up our writing before we start and get us going. So it's going to be useful for people who have more than one book out there in the world. But yeah, so let's talk about where we start, like right from the point of getting an idea. Where do your ideas come from?
I think it has to come from what you read, what you love to read yourself, because it's going to be easier. It doesn't have to be the trope that you write, but I think it's going to be a lot easier to begin if you don't know where to begin.
Knowing something that you've read and something you know well. What about your individual story idea, like the one thing, the hook or the angle that you're going to use? How do you find that?
I think finding what's popular in what you read, what popular tropes there are, and what appeals to you. Is if you read I don't know, secret baby tropes, then that could be something that you could just latch onto right from the start, and you'll know how that flows. Make it a bit easier.
Yeah. What about you, Wendy? Where do your ideas come from?
They're just there, really. Does that help? No.
That's so helpful.
So I'm a prolific reader. We never copy other people's work, but I still, you get ideas and a little, that's always been the thing for me. I get my ideas from watching movies or life or whatever. Something will just trigger me and it'll go, oh, okay. Or an object, my father-in-law bought me a pair of really old glasses, like from the 1800s. And that was an idea, just sort of things like that. They just sort of, I think as you write books that the ideas do come and then form, but I mean that very first kernel is a different story again, isn't it? That first idea. But for me it's sort of something that I get from outside sources, really.
Yeah. And I think also if you're reading something, your mind kind of goes, well, what if?
Yes.
Or just a different take on it, or a different scenario.
I always get ideas when I'm doing something that's quite repetitive. So whether it's walking or showering or gardening or something that you're not necessarily engaged, like trying to squeeze an idea out, and often things will. So I always keep a notes app on my phone and a notebook as well. I've got all my ideas in. I mean, you can have lots of ideas. That's the thing. Not necessarily all of them are going to be written. And sometimes you can pick from the best idea. So I think it's having some way of kind of keeping note of them, because I guarantee that you're going to think, oh man, I'm going to remember that. That's a really good idea. Then you go and finish the grocery shop or whatever, and I guarantee you can never quite remember.
And don't you hate it when you think, oh, that was such a good idea too?
And we always think we're going to remember it.
Always.
And it's not there because we haven't written it down.
2 o'clock in the morning, it's the most brilliant thing you could ever imagine.
The dream
sometimes
ones.
those 2 o'clock in the morning ones aren't very good ideas, I have to say.
That is true.
Woken up
and still want to remember what it was.
Because it's very annoying not remembering. I like how Jennifer Lynn Barnes talks about it, and she talks about writing the id list, and And so when she's looking for story ideas and trying to think of stuff, she goes back to this list, and the id list is this list of things that she loves in books and stories. So I think her ones were like scenes on roofs and scenes in the rain, for example. So those are two things but it could be things like Cheryl was talking about her favorite trope, like, you know, if you love secret babies, then that's something that's drawing you forward and you love that kind of stuff. So you're really going to be kind of more interested and excited about it if you're talking about, you know, the secret baby story that you've got in your head, or I love enemies to lovers stories. So I would always lean towards the enemies to lovers story versus a friends to lovers story, which I don't tend to like reading. So that kind of stuff can help you too, like as well. Like you think of your favorite book and look at the trope of that, maybe without not stealing the idea of it, like the specifics, but look at the broader themes or the broader ideas in your favorite kind of books to read. Then that gives you a direction to head in anyway, and then you can create the specifics down from that. Yeah,
Agreed.
So do you have a theme or a theme is kind of what I'm trying to say. I was going to say hook as well, but maybe a hook is different, but like that kind of stuff. Do you a general thought, or do you create the characters and know the smaller story?
Yeah, I'm pretty much, I think characters are key for me. I'm character driven, and the plot comes when I know who the characters are. So usually the man is the first one. It takes me ages to find his name. That's the only thing I plot. And that is, once I've got him, what he looks like, the feel for him, whether he's angsty or whatever, then I get her. Well, they sort of both come together at once, and then I'll work out where they're going to be and what they're going to do, you know, more so than a setting. That I need to have the character pretty much nailed down before I can begin to write.
But so within having that character though, is there kind of like and it's always a romance, but is there a kind of type of romance you're aiming for, or do you feel like it
depends if I'm writing historical or contemporary.
Yeah.
And writing both can be a bit conflicting. I can't put a Duke in a Colorado, mountain town, much as I would like to. So yeah, I mean, for me, yeah. It could work, right?
There you go.
Time travel. Do I know what the setting is? What are you saying?
No, not the setting. I'm talking about like is it a story where it's going to be really emotional and angsty and they're going to be kind of pulled apart, or is it going to be a story where they're kind of like best friends who figure, is there a kind of
the backstory is usually worked out pretty quickly. As soon as I start writing, I know where they've come from. I know usually one or the other of them, because I'm write series, one or the other of them is going to be obviously the main in the town or wherever it is, and all the family. And there's, the backstory is the key to driving the story, right? Let's be honest. That's it in a nutshell. We don't want to download all of that backstory into the book. Only want to have snatches of it as you go through. But the backstory is, they always say the book starts from the day after the event, don't they? The backstory, and then the book starts. So for me, it's about, okay, what is the real driving factor in their past that has put them at this point, at this time, in this location? Why? And so more often than not, that will then dictate which direction I'm heading into. If he works in a cafe or owns a cafe, or whatever, there's got to be, both of them have got backstory, and that's what motivates them to be the people they are and the story I'm going to write. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So what about you, Cheryl? Do you?
No, mine characters play a huge part. They are the main part of the story in essence, but the setting is huge. It is a character in itself. But also it's the tone of the story, because if I'm writing a cozy mystery, it's going to be a murder. So that actually comes first. And I have to say it's kind of fluid at the beginning, because even the murdered person can change if things aren't going the way I want them to.
Yeah.
And also the murderer. Because sometimes if it's too obvious, then I have to bring somebody else in. And yeah, so it's not a particularly linear story either for me these days. In some ways it's harder to write than a romance.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I was writing romance, then it's definitely the characters, but I still have to have an idea of what the issue is. You know, there has to be an issue.
Yeah.
It's not going to be sweetness and light, because it can't be. There has to be some progression.
So you're starting, so if Wendy starts with the characters, you need to start with the murder and the detail. There's a certain level of detail that you need to kind of flow through, as well as having and I don't necessarily know it. It kind of writes it into itself, and then I can flesh it out later, but I still have to have an idea of you know, like how they meet, or you know, that kind of thing, and whether that then ends up the first chapter. It might not, it might get pushed down a bit, or usually it's in the first chapter.
So you have things that must happen within the book, right?
Yeah.
So those things, do you plan those things before the book starts, or no?
But you know that they have to happen, though. That's the point, right? So you know that I'm halfway through, so I want a piece of conflict or something happening here, and I know that I need the big reveal for who did the murder, and I know I need the murder at the beginning, and you know what has to be there. It's just,
can't have a saggy middle, so something's got to be happening there that's you know, a bit more gripping. And I know that each chapter is going to end on something that's going to follow through to the next one.
Wouldn't it be nice if saggy middles were that easy to fix?
But on every level,
actually. On every level.
But I just want to point out for anybody listening that's like listening to, particularly for Cheryl and Wendy, they've written a lot of books, and so a lot of the structural things, knowing what a saggy middle is for a start, is something that has come with experience. And for those of us at the other end of the spectrum, like at in the shallow end of the pool, which is myself, I remember going to a conference and they were talking about the theme and identifying that, and I seriously think that held me up for at least a year, because I just couldn't wrap my head around what a theme was, how on earth you're meant to. It was like another thing that I had to fit in somehow, and I didn't really know what I was fitting in and why. So but then I heard a talk from Jane Ann Krentz, who knows her stuff, and she was saying it wasn't until after she'd written something like 30 books that she figured out, oh, okay, my theme is, and it was like this, and I'm trying to think, it was she called it the core story, and it was similar, even though she might have been writing historicals or paranormal romance, that there was a core story that was similar in all her books. And by that it might be an example, feisty woman finds success kind of thing, like it's something fairly like that, but she didn't realize it until somebody pointed it out. Somebody outside her. So you don't need, I just think you don't have to know everything, I think.
Well, even talking about the theme, like basically Wendy and Cheryl say neither of them use a theme, so
no,
that's kind of
what about you, Toodles? I mean, you've got a few books under your belt now. What do you what's your process for?
Well, I've never used, well, okay, I've done the same thing as Jane Ann Krentz. I've looked back on my books now and I can see a kind of common core story that I've got, which is kind of characters who are hidden away, who are very special and discover that they're special, and then kind of come forward into the limelight and become great. So it could be a lot of sessions with the therapist over that one. So that's fine. That's my kind of core story that I often write about. But the theme thing is something, and the reason I mentioned it is because I've recently been listening to Maggie Stivater sessions, how to write thing, and she talks about how she can't write a book until she knows the theme. And so she doesn't always necessarily write romance. So she's writing kind of in a more fantasy. She often has romance in her books, but then more kind of young adult fantasy kind of genre. And so maybe like for romance, I think maybe the theme or the trope might always be a kind of romance. So it might not be, and maybe cozy mystery, the theme might always be kind of, mystery and figuring things out. But she just talked about how one of her books, she couldn't figure out the plot properly until she knew that the theme was kind of like bittersweet romance. And I can kind of see for me, from my perspective, like if you know that it's going to be a bittersweet romance and that's the feel that you want the readers to get from your books, that would change and create certain actions within the plot, and how you would, there needs to be a moment where they're kind of kept apart because of things outside of their own control, but they really want to be together, and all these kinds of things. So it almost creates the plot for you. So
just be knowing that certain tone.
Like it creates so and I wouldn't say that you would want every book to be the bittersweet romance. Like next time it might be like a sweet love story where love conquers all or something, but it's just knowing, or an uplifting story of romance and whatever. I don't know, just occurred to me that would be kind of a neat way to do it, that to have that kind of feeling in the back of your mind that you wanted to create. But like Shah says, don't go
I feel like the word feeling though is a lot more approachable than the word theme. Sounds sort of something quite academic to me. And feeling like, do you want a kind of a maybe a light-hearted, joyful, sort of light-filled, shall we say, story, or something that's kind of quite shadowy and dark, that is revenge but success, that kind of thing. I feel like is a bit more. But again, that will, as Cheryl said right from the start, is when you look at what you're reading and what you're enjoying reading, you will usually find a trend. I mean, most people tend to prefer, a particular type of feeling or vibe, if you like, in their books they read. Not always. Some of us, a lot of people read. Yeah.
But you get different things from different genres, right? Like when I think about reading like a dark romance or something like that, that's kind of really angsty and kind of like these kind of more darker themes going on, and sometimes if I've read a few of those, then I'm kind of like, I just need something a little bit lighthearted, and then I'll go and read a rom-com, and then I'll be like, that's fun and easy and doesn't require me to pull my heart out and stomp on it, like these. Or someone like Colleen Hoover, I've just started reading one of her books because of TikTok made me do it, and I get the impression that I'm going to have my heart torn out and stomped on as I get through this book, and that's just the kind of book she writes, versus when I read a Penny Reid book and I know that it's just going to be kind of more fun. I mean, there's deeper themes in her books, but it's going to be more fun and more lighthearted, and they're all going to be happy at the end, and it's all going to be fine. And sometimes that's all I want. So just knowing that what you want to give the readers when you're starting out, maybe that's a good way to think of it. Like,
I think any book that you write has got to pull something from a person, right? It's got to have that emotional tug. I mean, we could all write the same book and probably get a different result and get a different emotion, draw a different emotion from a reader. But I think the key to remember is a well-written book, no matter what it is, even if it's about a plant growing, a well-written book will emote with a couple in the background, clearly. But you know what I mean? It's like, it's about emotion, isn't it? It's about what you're going to feel from it. So whatever you're putting in, wherever your emotion's coming from when you're writing the book, I think that's the driving force.
Important. Yeah,
it is.
Very true. Very, very true. So once you kind of know what your genre is going to be, and you kind of have an idea of maybe your characters and your thing, what do you do then? Is that just
this is the tricky part.
You just sit down and write, or is
the overthinking?
Nothing goes like it.
So just get a few words on the paper, you mean?
Just get a casual few words.
I think the key here is to just write, the first chapter, to write the first paragraph, to write the first sentence, and go from there. Because I mean, how many times have we said this? How many times does everybody else say this? You can't edit something if it's not written down. So get something written down, and even if you go over it 10 times, which I'm not advocating, but you've got a base to start with, haven't you? You've got your characters, hopefully, or you've at least got your heroine or your hero, and you can write about them. Make them do something.
Getting an idea down and then looking at that idea and then going, okay, how can I grow that idea? So what's going to come off that idea? So where do they live? There's a story. Where's a chapter? Where do it? Like doing it that and breaking it down to, if it overwhelms you, getting the idea and then coming off the idea is a way to grow the story.
And there's different ways to do that, right? Like, so I know authors who will get a scene come to them. They'll be like, this is this amazing scene between these two characters, and it's not at the beginning of the book. It might be midpoint, or it might be the black moment. Could be anything, and they'll write that scene first because that's the most compelling thing to them, and that's the scene they want to get down. And then once they've got that scene, then another scene might occur to them, and then they're kind of writing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be linear, that you're sitting down and writing the first page. And often what happens in a first book is that you start writing, say, the first chapter, and then someone else, once you've finished it, what you realize is that actually the book starts in chapter 5, and you can get rid of all the first 4 chapters because they're just.
And doesn't that hurt?
Yeah. It does hurt.
And that's why I have to write linear, because there's people we know that write in scene, and then join them together. And I just, the thought of getting to that scene and then not being able to use it. I break out in hives, mate, knowing there's 2,000 words, even though I scrap so many.
You always cut words, though.
I just can't do that, you know.
We interviewed a lovely author, Danielle Romero, probably over a year ago now. I don't know, time has seemed to have morphed over the last couple of years. But I noticed she posted on her Facebook page the other day, and she talked about how she was writing, and she just writes scenes, like she writes in scenes. Then at the end, she puts it all over the show. Then she puts it together like a puzzle, and then writes sort of some transition, like to connect things, or like it's like. So I'm crocheting at the moment. We're getting into sort of autumn, winter here in New Zealand, and so I start handcrafts in the cooler weather, and it's like making granny squares, and then at the end you put them in the patterns how you like and the colors, and then you sew them together. And then there were people in there saying, oh man, that's how I do it too. I thought I was the only one. Then other people saying that just blows my mind, and that would just I can't even.
It actually makes me feel unwell just thinking about it.
But the point is that everyone does things differently, and it's whatever works for your brain. But I think the important thing is what Cheryl's already mentioned, is getting it down, getting the words out there, getting it onto paper. You
don't know how you're going to write until you write.
And I know that I've done it, is I've written the ending. Before I'm even close to it, because I've just thought this is how I want it to end. And actually, even if I haven't got the chapter before that, or even the 10 before that, I know where I'm heading now. So it's not the worst thing in the world, it's just different. I don't do it all the time, but I think when you're starting out, the world is your oyster. You can be a plotter. You can work out something that's going to happen in every, say your book is 50,000 words long, and that's going to equal, say, I don't know, 25 chapters. So you could actually write something in each of those 25 chapters that could lead you right through the story if you wanted to. You can try all of these things until you find out, like the rest of us have, what works for you.
I mean, all of us have tried so many different ways, right? I mean, we all have. I mean, even I've tried plotting.
I mean, it's just crazy talk, but she tried.
And I would also say too, something that I discovered is I love reading sort of dark and angsty stories, particularly paranormal ones. And yet when I tried to write that, it just didn't. So what you love to read doesn't necessarily translate to what you're comfortable with writing. But again, you've got to try it until
it's a starting point, isn't it? It's somewhere to start from. That's what you need.
But also our journey will evolve. I mean, the books that I wrote many years ago to now, nothing. You can't draw a parallel between them,
Maybe not in terms of the writing. I think the styles evolve, but I think going back to the core story, it's still there right from the very first. But if we had said to you, Wendy, identify your core story now, please, before you start writing, you would have been like, no.
I still probably couldn't do that.
I'm not going to do that. So I think with outlining, we've covered this with guests, haven't we? I mean, any which way or not, we've had, there's people that, I mean, it can be from using like software like Plotter, Plottr, to
Scrivener.
To Scrivener, to corkboards, to mind maps, to
pictures,
the 3-act structure, the 4-act structure, the
Pinterest.
Pinterest, really?
That's right. Pinterest has got some great ideas in it.
Oh, yeah. I thought, well, I guess you could create a story on Pinterest as well with just having pictures of what happens in the scenes. There you go. We've just invented
True,
one.
as you've changed massively over the years how you write. You were a pantser for a while there.
I wrote my first book as a pantser because I thought that that's what I was. And that's actually something I wanted to say is like, it took me 10 years to write that first book. And so if anyone's out there is on their first book and trying to get that finished, I would say, don't mess around with too much plotting, because I think plotting can derail you as well. And you can spend years plotting and not actually writing anything. But on the other side of that, don't let no plotting at all derail you. Like, you've got to give yourself kind of keep going. Like maybe if you're taking a long time to write that book, maybe you need to be sitting down and working out a few things, like just these things are all ways to kind of procrastinate and stop yourself from finishing the book, and whichever way it goes. I mean, you can find ways to procrastinate whether you're plotting or you're pantsing. But I definitely found for me that plotting, at least in a vague story, through like using things like Michael Haig's 6-step system or the story grid or whatever else, just keeps me on track and keeps me kind of moving along in the story. So I think that's the main thing, is like getting to the end, like from start to finish. And it's really easy to be tempted to, like, I used to be part of a writing group where we read each other's work each week, and it was fine when it was short stories, and then we moved to writing novels, and it became harder because you'd give them a chapter and then they'd give you all this critique on that chapter, and you'd want to go back and fix that chapter, and it would stall you from writing the next chapter.
Absolutely.
So I almost think that you need to kind of get your first draft out without showing it to anyone at any stage, and just get it done. And then at that point, once you've got this formed thing, then you can kind of go back and edit it and fix it and show people and ask for advice and kind of work with it then. But
I agree.
That first act of creation, I think, is something for you to do on your own.
I think another thing that I remember Wendy and I used to do right at the beginning, we were in a little critique group with another woman, and it worked kind of for a little while, but it didn't really push us forward. But we would get together and we would actually talk our stories, and so I've got to this stage, and now I don't really know what to do, and just brainstorming ideas. You'd be really surprised what you can come up with. You might not use any of them, but you might get one great gem that you think, that's now what I need to write.
I use my husband for that now. He doesn't like it, but when I get him in the spa pool, it's great. He's captured, and he goes, "Oh no, we're not going to do this again, are we?" And I'm like, and he's really good at working out the suspense of stuff.
I do that to my husband too.
I think it's important.
He comes up with dumb ideas, but like it's just having someone to bounce my ideas off.
Absolutely.
But he'll say something like add a kangaroo in or something. Like, I mean, I'm not.
My husband will go, "Why don't you just
but
kill them?" And I'm like the romance dude, like get with it.
My husband said to me quite shortly the other day, "Why do you ask me?
If you're not going to take my advice."
Oh, you're the only one here.
But getting back to finishing that first draft, I struggled for many years to finish my first book. And then I went to conference, and the wonderful Anne Gracie, I was talking to her, and she said to me, and I've said this a million times, but it's just finishing the book. So if something stalls you, just write what that is and keep going.
And block letters.
And block letters.
I've got no idea.
I'm clueless. Got no idea. Help. But then
send help.
And just move on. And I wrote that book within the speed of light after I'd spoken to her, and she gave me that permission. So I'm giving you permission to move on, people.
You heard it here.
There's lots of things you might not know as you start writing. You might not know exactly the town or what you're going to call it. You might know how it looks, but not what you're going to call it. You might not know your characters' names, which Wendy would be horrified by. But there's things that you don't actually need to know.
Exactly. Animals are another one. Animals can really block us insofar as we need a really cute name. And then
5 hours later.
So I had this book, and there was this pony and this duck, and so she had a name. Her name was Monica, and her duck was the name of the duck, because I just had no idea what to call it. So it never got a name. So don't get blocked on silly things that are going to stop the flow. Get
Mm.
writing, you know, just get it down.
Yeah. And we're coming, I mean, there's also like NaNoWriMo, there's sort of structured things that can, you know, help you keep like a little bit of outside accountability or a little bit of outside pressure. But going back to the how to set yourself up for success, I would say trying to, I mean, I personally don't think you need to write every day, but I think regularly is probably the important thing, because it's a little bit, for me, it's like exercise. And if you, once you stop, it's really hard to start again.
Again, I think it depends on you though.
Yeah.
Right? What works for you? I find
Yeah.
if I write consistently all the time, I write
Yeah.
better, and my
Yeah.
stories are better and everything flows better if I stop and go back to it. I don't, but I know a lot of people that will you know, that write a month on, month off. I think Jane Castle is one of them, isn't it? You know,
but within that month she's doing one whole thing, so one whole project. I think the problem with, in my opinion, I think the problem with leaving too big a gap between your writing is that you then have to go back and reread it, because you don't know where you left it, or you're not sure if you actually wrote that already somewhere. So
but it's also losing interest. Interest.
Yeah, true.
And
true.
it's like, you know, you can tell yourself you don't want to go out and exercise, and the longer you don't want to go out and exercise, you don't want to go exercise, and by 2 months down the track you're not exercising, and really who cares, you know? That's like anything, right? Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do that I found, if you are really stuck, is I found actually talking the story through to yourself on the phone, because, you know, not all of us have got husbands, and, you know, like I talk to my cats, they're really pretty unresponsive, to be honest with you.
I mean, you need to try.
Maybe it's since they like it, they're enjoying
they're a
it.
bit slack, really. I think you should get better cats.
You know, there's food usually does help them become more vocal, but anyhow, but you know, you don't need to necessarily invest in dictation equipment. You can just use your iPhone or your whatever.
Well, even Word will read it back to you.
Yeah, or a voice memo though, something to say, you know, this scene, blah 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 blah, and sometimes that just talking it helps, you know, and it doesn't feel lost then because you've recorded it. Unlike talking to yourself.
Even writing it. So sometimes I will sit down and I'll just start going, okay, so if I want this to happen, then how does that happen? And does this person have to do this thing? And and just the action of kind of figuring it out or writing it out, and the thing helps the words start to flow and starts to give you ideas. Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely.
It's a learned trait. It's like anything, right? We train to work. We train to train to, if we're going to run a marathon, God forbid that ever happen, you know, but we train for everything. So this is no different. You have to train to write. It's not just going to flow from your fingers and be a masterpiece unless you are an outlier. But I'm just saying.
But even the outliers, I still think they have to sit down and do the practice.
They've done the hard work.
They've all done their apprenticeship like we have.
So what happens? So we're writing the book and we are struggling, like there's something wrong, we can't get it done. Either you're getting bored, or you've written yourself into a corner, or anything like that. What do you do in those circumstances?
Well, if you're bored, that's a problem, because
the reader will be.
The reader's going to be bored. So you got to change it up. You've got to put a bit of spice, not necessarily in a sexual way, but
spicy.
You've got to,
bring in the kangaroo.
You do have to.
I did have a piece of advice. I went to a session with a coach, and she said to me, it was a writing coach thing, and she said one way to, like, if you're writing a book and then you get stuck, is to completely turn it on its head, like just completely, like, put everyone 10 years in the future, have a time traveler arrive on the doorstep, like just do something completely crazy and just see what happens. And maybe that's gonna, you know, like, it might be like, oh, I don't want to set it 10 years in the future, that sounds terrible, but, you know, but there might be something that you can do that kind of just completely just
I think changing the point of view of the character is good too. You know, we don't want to head hop within too much. If, you know, a couple of months is all right, but I think it's really, like, I've written scenes in the book, and I'm like, that is so blah, you know, like there's just nothing happening, it's not working. Then I'm like, okay, who's got the most invested in this scene and who's got the most to lose? And quite often you just swap it on its head and change the point of view to the other character, and it instantly takes on a new life. And I think that's in writing, we've all written ourselves into corners. I mean, what you're saying is something that's all going to happen to all of us at some stage or other. We're going to get to a point in the book where we think this is the biggest pile of crap ever written. You know, it's just the way it is. It's part of the journey, but it's how you work your way out of it that you grow as a writer. I think that's how we grow as writers, by working our way. It's not going to be an easy journey. We wouldn't have done this if we wanted easy, right? You've just got to get on and do it.
And change your hat, I think, and put on your reader's hat as well. You know, how does that sentence actually sound? How is that chapter actually moving the book forward? Is it not? If it's not, does it need to be there? You know,
exactly. Has it ticked all the boxes for what is needed in a chapter? Moving it forward, do the characters interact? You know, what's in the scene? What do you want to get out of the scene? If you're not getting it, then change it.
Yeah. One of the pieces of advice I was given that sounds easy but is really hard, and it's trust the process, because sometimes if you're feeling bored or you're feeling blocked in, it could be just that you're tired in the process. It doesn't necessarily mean that the writing is not okay or the story's not okay. So you just kind of gotta keep going through that.
And
I think for a lot of us, people like myself that are really back in the olden days, before self-publishing, you used to write 3 chapters in a synopsis and submit them to Harlequin, and I was the queen of 3 chapters in a synopsis, because it's all exciting and new and fresh there, but you don't actually have to finish the story, and it was a dangerous place to get, because actually 4 chapters onwards, that's where the really hard graft starts. And I thought there was something wrong with me, because I couldn't, it didn't feel the same as the beginning. And I think that's true, isn't it, of a lot of creative projects. When you start off, you're all kind of energetic and you're full of wonder, and you're exploring new turf. Then after a while, the legs get a little heavier and the hands, you know, you got to kind of keep working.
You just want that feeling, that reward, don't you?
Yeah.
For doing that, for finishing that, but you just want that to keep going. And like you say, sometimes as you get further into the book, it's not quite as rewarding, because you.
Yeah, and I think I just want to, if anybody's in that position, that's kind of normal. I think I felt like I was the only person that felt like that, and there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Again, probably need the same therapist that Trudy is probably booking herself into now as well. But
let's go to joint therapy, Sha.
I was going to say, maybe we could get like a discount, frequent flyer discount. But it's normal. It's normal to feel like that. And I think, you know, you see writers on TV or the movies or whatever, and the words just flow, and it's work.
I think what helps with that, in my mind anyway, is the idea of knowing why you're doing it, why you're putting yourself into this situation, and you're learning new stuff, and you're trying to create these characters and trying to do all these things. And like, so for me, often it's like I want to create the same kind of feeling in my readers that I have felt from books in my past. Like like the books that I've really loved that have carried me along, and I've wanted to be a part of that world and be those characters. That's kind of what I'm trying to create for other people, and kind of for myself as I'm writing. So when I get to a difficult bit and I'm kind of going, oh, this is so hard and I can't keep going, and oh God, I'm kind of stopping and thinking about that and kind of going, how can I make this awesome? Like, what can I do to, is there another character I can add in? Is there a donkey that I can put into the story that will change everything, or a kangaroo if I'm in Australia, or at a zoo? But like there's and sometimes that takes you over the kind of, oh God, it's chapter 4 and I don't know what to do moment. Like, and often for me it was the middle of the book. I'd get to the middle of the book and it would be a saggy middle, and I wouldn't have known to call it that back then, but now, so the saggy middle where it seems really boring and nothing's happening and I can't figure out what to do. Well, then that's when the explosions start and something does have to happen, so keeping yourself going in that way.
And maybe if this really is your first book and you are struggling right from the get-go, maybe turn it into a short story. and give yourself permission to finish it.
Yeah.
You know,
another thing that occurs to me as you say that is what if you're starting and you're really struggling and you don't, you feel like there's something wrong, maybe it's the wrong genre for you. Like maybe I was mentoring a young kid from the local high school, and he was writing a murder mystery, and it felt really hard. It felt quite forced, like he was struggling. And I said to him, well, what do you read? And he was like, oh, well, I read fantasy. I was like, well, why aren't you writing a fantasy book? Like, and as soon as we changed it to fantasy, he was like gangbusters. He had this most amazing story, and it just was awesome. And he was really excited. And that was where he actually, I don't know why he'd gone with the murder, but maybe that's what he felt like he should be doing. So sometimes in literary or in writing, there's this feeling of doing things because we have to do things a certain way, or that's what people are expecting, or maybe there's some literary snob.
Or people aren't expecting, maybe you don't want to be judged by the family or whatever for what you're writing too.
So you might just have to really stop and think about, what do I really want to be doing, and what do I really want to write, not what I should be writing, what other people want me to write. And I think that's a big part of it too. So have we got any more advice for people? I
think that should get you started.
Get you motivated and into the first draft.
I agree. And I think, and I mean, I'm the marketer here. Like usually for me, everything comes that comes before anything else. But in this case, I would say that if you're starting off and this is your first, particularly your first book that you aiming to finish, I would say leave that aside, because that can be, you can get very caught up in thinking, is this going to sell or whatever. Ideally try and leave that once you've finished the first draft at least, because you can,
because I think it is kind of an apprenticeship writing your first draft, your very first book, and I think you need to just get it out there and get it done, and then you get the feel for what it's like to finish a book, and maybe this will be a published book and it will be the best book in the world, but maybe it won't also, but that doesn't matter. Either way, the success is in figuring out what you want to write, then writing it, and then finishing it. That's actually
finishing
a big success, because not everyone, there's some ridiculously large number of people who want to write books, and not a ridiculously large number of them who don't, who actually finish, is very small. So hopefully we've given people something to think about, and
also I'd say reward yourself as you go. So maybe bring in a reward system too, like, so 5,000 words, I don't know,
get a fluffy sticker.
Puppy sticker set, or but that's nice too. I think giving yourself, celebrating the little steps as you go, not just necessarily the big end goal, although you should totally have a big party at the end once you've done it.
100%. Get that first chapter written.
Yes.
Just
get it down.
Right
now.
Go now.
Stop what you're doing. Go now. Okay, awesome. So where can we be found, Char?
We can be found at spargirlspodcast.com, and we're on Facebook and Twitter. No other social media at this point, but we're also on Patreon at patreon.com/spargirlspodcast. We've got some goodie rewards there for our patrons, and we would love to have you come join us. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone's enjoyed this session of the Spar Girls podcast. We'll be back again next week, but for now, farewell.
Bye.
Bye.